We'll Review It, Our Shelves, is a podcast in which we discuss movies that we own on DVD and Blu-ray. This implies that they've been out for quite some time, and we conduct this podcast on the assumption that most of our listeners have seen these movies. If by odd chance that you are behind on movies, there is a possibility that we discuss spoilers of not just the titled movie, but many related. Be forewarned.
Going somewhere, Pop?
Sure are. It's a vacation with me and my best buddy.
Donald Duck?
No, silly. With you.
A goofy movie.
Morning, son.
Dad?
It's hard to be cool when your dad is goofy.
Yup. Hello and welcome to episode 7 of We'll Review It, Our Shelves, the podcast where Dan and Brian review the movies on their shelves. Every 2 weeks, we will take a randomly selected movie from our collection and we'll review it ourselves. As mentioned, Brian and Dan are reviewing the movies. This week's movie is a goofy movie, as you may have noticed. Joining us this week is our special guest, Dan's wife, Nina. Say hi.
Say hello, Nina.
Hello.
Welcome.
Thanks. I'm super excited to be on your new podcast.
We are super excited to have you. I know on our last episode, Ant-Man, when we randomly selected the movie of a goofy movie, Dan sounded a little less than enthused. He sounded incredulous, like, really? But he said he would talk to you, and here you are, because he said that you are a huge fan of this movie, or at least a fan.
Okay, I am a fan, and I would just like to say that I am the reason that he has that movie on his shelf. So, I feel
that's
like,
awesome.
Yeah, I feel like this is perfect. So, I'm just going to give you a little quick background. I have been watching a goofy movie since I was a young tot. I loved it then, and even now I feel the same way. I feel like it's an amazing movie. It seems timeless to me. So when he told me that he hadn't seen it, I feel like, during that dating time in a relationship, it's fun to share, experiences, memories. So we watched the movie together. I told him how much I enjoyed it as a kid, why I enjoy it now. He seemed to enjoy it. I got him the movie, and that's why we have a copy on his shelf.
Awesome. As we were conversing prior to this, I was telling Dan that I've been a fan of Goofy for, well, at least 12 years, but for much longer than that, because I'm just a big fan of Goofy. In fact, this movie is sort of autobiographical for my kids, because I am the Goofy dad. I have no problem with that. Yeah, we own this movie because I'm a fan of Goofy. Yeah, it's got nothing to do with my kids, although that was part of it. But as Dan and I were talking, I was telling him we went to Disney World about 12 years ago, or 13 years ago, 12 and a half. It was December of 2004, and my youngest was about the same age Tesla is now, maybe a little older. And we had her in the car, and we were trying to get her to say, "Yup, I'm Goofy," and it came out as, "Haha, I'm Goofy." And we have watched that movie over, or that home video, over and over and over again.
That's amazing.
And that is going to be, in fact, I'm going to inject that into the podcast right now. I played it kind of for Dan, but it was really hard to translate through the thing, so I will share that video with you.
I can't wait to see it.
Offline. It's cute. Yeah, and the girls were in Minnie Mouse costumes because we were getting ready to go to the Magic Kingdom.
Yeah, I was going to say, it probably, in a toddler voice, it kind of probably came out more as Minnie Mouse than Goofy at that time, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It was awesome. But like I said, I own this movie because I wanted to own this movie, not because I have children. And that's one of the things that I like about a lot of Disney animation is it's for adults too, and you can enjoy it as an adult and enjoy it with your kids.
So that was one of the things that I was thinking about, because obviously we rewatched the movie recently, and I thought the same thing. I feel like I watched this movie as a child, but even the thing we were discussing is that even at that time, for some reason, the movie, it makes the viewer relate to both, right? So as a kid, I was like, oh, I totally understand where Max is coming from and not wanting to feel like a child who's always hanging around with his dad, who's really goofy, right? But then even as a child, I still understood, oh, look at the dad. He just wants to be his friend. He wants to be involved in his life. And now as an adult watching it back, the same thing. I feel for both of them. I feel obviously now as a parent, I feel a little more for the dad, especially when he throws out, I just want to be part of your life. I still want to be your friend, those things. But then of course, I feel for the other character, Max, and understanding where he's coming from. So I think, like you said, it doesn't matter whether you're a child watching the movie or an adult watching the movie. Somehow you're able to relate to both characters and you're able to enjoy the film. So I agree.
It is absolutely a timeless story. And when I watched this getting ready for this podcast, I watched it with my 17-year-old.
Right.
And she enjoyed it. And we had a good time, and I had forgotten how much I cared for this movie. So I think she went to work, and it was a few days later, and I watched it again. Like, I'm just going to watch this again because I like it that much. And I know we're spoiling our final thoughts where we talk about how we feel about the movie, but I don't really care. This is just a good, fun movie.
I was about to say, this is a special edition. We have a special guest, so, yeah.
So there's no layout.
There's no layout.
We can deviate from the pattern. So we now know how this movie got onto Dan's shelf, and your I'm gonna be southern for a minute. All y'all's shelves or y'all's shelves. I think y'all's is the appropriate vernacular for that.
We're from California, so we don't really talk about stuff like that. Those grammatical errors.
Look, I live in Virginia. We say y'all and all y'all. And we drink sweet tea, you uncouth heathens on the West Coast.
We drink sweet tea over here.
But you have to order it special, and they usually say, oh, we have raspberry tea. Will that do? Like, no, I want sweet tea. Not unsweetened tea that I put sugar in. I want actual brewed as sweet tea.
Actually, I prefer the unsweetened tea, so we really can't talk about tea on this podcast.
Well, it's our podcast. We can talk about whatever we want. So when you watch this again, did you feel, and Dan and I have discussed this before, did you feel transported sort of back in time to the first time you saw it?
I do. Every time I watch this movie, like I said, I can't remember the exact age, but I remember being super young and enjoying this movie and watching it multiple times over. So when I watch it now, I think my most prominent memory is just rewatching the movie. And side note, I didn't even realize that the movie's only like an hour and 10 minutes or something. It's actually a fairly short movie, but I don't know, Brian, how you felt watching it. When I was watching it, every time I watch it, I feel like it's a journey, though. I feel like it's a good, normal 2-hour movie. I feel like all the emotions you go through and all the different scenes and the entire film, it feels a lot longer than its actual duration. Do you feel that way at all?
I do. It's funny that you mention that because when I watched it the first time, I was surprised it was over so quickly, but it feels like you're there for so long and you look up like, oh, only been an hour and 18 minutes or
Right.
or whatever. No, it tells a very complete story, and I like that.
Right. Yeah. So anyway, back to your question, was that, yes, in my mind, when I think back on the first times I've watched this movie, I actually think of how many times I've repeated watching the film.
Nice. What did you think of the songs in this? Because it's a Disney movie, and there are always songs.
Okay, so I'm not a fan of musicals or any films like that, but this,
You have to leave the podcast right now.
I have to admit, yes, I am not at all a musical person. I can't think of one musical I enjoyed. But anyway, so this film, don't kick me off yet. Wait, let me finish. So this film, as I was watching it the last time, I was like, wow, I didn't realize how many songs are interjected into it, right? Especially because, like I just said, I didn't realize it was such a short film. So to have that many songs included, I feel like it didn't bother me at all. However, the last song that they play in the film, I think it's something like Listen to Each Other, right? So that's the last song they play as the story's ending and he finally ends up at the concert. And I have to say, listening to the lyrics of that song, not only is it a perfect fit for the end of the film, in my opinion, but it's also a great song by itself. If you listen to the words and how it all kind of intertwines with the film, I think it's a really great song, like a little bit maybe underrated, in my opinion.
Yeah, I was looking on IMDb, and this movie has, I think, a 4.8 rating from Metacritic. Oh, no, 6.8, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was about to say, I'm looking at IMDb right now. 6.8 out of 10. So that's respectable.
But it's still kind of underrated. I think this just went straight to video, if I recall.
No, I do believe it was in theaters for a short time. I was still in the Navy. Well, we were still in the Navy at the time. But I do remember it was in theaters for a short time. Wasn't a huge release, but I do remember the commercials for it. Okay.
But the songs seemed like they were very early 90s as opposed to mid-90s. I think when we were getting into the Seattle grunge thing going on, which was pretty popular. I think that's part of the reason why they didn't catch on, was because they had a late 80s, early 90s kind of feel to them, and it was the mid-90s when this movie came out.
Yeah, there was actually a little moment of laughter when we were watching it together, the climax where they show up at the concert, and Nina pointed out that there was a very Michael Jackson feel to the rock star.
Yeah, to the Powerline character, yeah.
And, she's like, Michael? And I'm like, yeah, kind of.
And now, so speaking of timeless, right? So now when I think of the way that the character that he went to go, at the concert, he went to go see this performer and the way he's moving and singing, now, this time that we're in, it's kind of like Bruno Mars. Again, timeless. That's what I'm talking about. I just feel like there's a lot of little things in this film that are underrated.
Absolutely. I completely agree that this movie is underrated. Like I said, I love Goofy, so that was a draw for me. I cannot continue talking about this movie without pointing out that of the three big Disney characters, Mickey, Donald, and Goofy, Goofy is the only one that we know that has had interpersonal relationships with a woman, because he's the only one that actually has offspring. Donald has nephews, Mickey has nephews, Goofy has a son.
So that's what we had discussed. Dan was saying that nowhere in the film do they talk about the mom or the wife in the family. And so I said, if I remember correctly, this was a series. Goofy had a show, right, on the Disney Channel prior to this movie coming out. So I told him I assumed that in the series they addressed that somewhere, but I don't know.
Yeah, it's not like I was, looking for an actual, not like we do with Star Wars, like who's the father or who's she related to. It's just something that I noticed and like, oh, there's no mother. But the thing is that it reminds me of is basically your 1950s sitcoms, where a lot of shows had where they had a father but no mother.
Yeah, like My Three Sons.
Yeah, My Three Sons, and there was one other one I was thinking of. Because all my favorite shows had full families. Addams Family and the Munsters, they had both parents.
Sure.
I Love Lucy. But there was one episode of Mystery Science Theater 3000, if there's any fans out there that remember that TV show. But there was a movie that they covered, was called EGA. And yeah, look that one up. That's one of the classics of MST3K. But anyways, before I get too far off, the characters, it was a single father and the daughter. And they, during the commercial breaks, they go, it's like, hey, Joel, why is that? Why is there, all these 50s, 60 style shows? And the explanation was, it's like, that way they can have a swinging bachelor who can mix it up with a lady but still give fatherly advice in the old wholesome 50s and 60s style.
Exactly.
And nobody ever talked about the mothers, whether or not they died, but of course back then you couldn't say divorce. That was a big no-no.
Oh, that was anathema.
Yeah, basically, having a family and having one or two kids was like tantamount to a death sentence in the 50s and 60s if you're a woman.
Well, it wasn't a death sentence. That's a very negative way of saying it. That was what they strove for. At least if we're to believe the iconic 50s television shows, that Barbara Billingsley, June Cleaver, she existed to support the family. That was the American dream. And this movie, without the mother, and I think, again, like Nina was saying, I think they do address it in the television show, but I think we're meant to believe that she passed away. I don't think that a Goofy movie Disney show would address that as a divorce thing.
Yeah, I think that's more socially acceptable answer, is that, she passed away, and just leave it at that. Mm-hmm. And it happened so far in the past that it doesn't become a heavy issue.
But I kind of have to say that I like that they don't address it, just personally. Like, that was never, like, a consideration. I always just was like, oh, okay, this is, like, a father-son bonding movie. And as an adult, I like that they don't address it, because that's uncomfortable as a parent to try to go through that so early in a Disney movie,
Absolutely, and I think it would have changed the entire tone of the movie. This movie was exceptionally lighthearted. Going back to the songs for just a minute, one of the things that I like musicals, so
I threw up a little bit, but I held the rest in. Okay.
Well, thanks for that. But I will say that there were no songs in this movie that particularly stood out as things I want to walk around the house humming or singing.
Oh.
But I had forgotten how many songs were infused in the movie. So when they take off on the fishing trip, mm-hmm. and they were angry with each other and they'd broken the radio, the keys start jingling and the pots start banging, and they just start making music out of the noises that occur on the trip. I found that interesting. I didn't really care for the song, Out on the Open Road, but I liked the manner in which they introduced it. It wasn't just, we're just going to break into song. There was some like, oh, look, the keys are jingling. Oh, hey, look, the pots are banging.
Right.
And I don't know if I could credit this movie for sort of giving me that perspective, but I know that I like to find the music in the world as I walk around and I listen to things.
Sure.
I will listen to the way the wind blows through the trees, and if I hear something else that sort of meshes up with it, and when you're driving down the road, you do hear the rhythm of the road, especially when you hit those breaks in the concrete where you hear that ta-dunk, 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 ta-dunk. Right. It gives you a rhythm. Life has a rhythm, and I like that they did that in this movie and then made a song out of it. So it seems strange that I'm getting something so deep out of a cartoon.
Right.
But I think that's important because that introduces children to the concepts of paying attention to the world around them and finding the magic in things. That's what I love about Disney.
Agree. Well, I think it's interesting that you said that you are a fan of musicals, but for this movie or this film, you didn't really feel like walking around humming a song, whereas I am not a fan. However, as soon as the song Listen to Each Other finished, I started singing it, humming it, and Dan was like, don't do that on the podcast. Like, he made a joke. But it's like, it totally, like, these songs to me are super fun, and I enjoyed them a lot, and I did want to walk around the house humming and singing, but I was not allowed. So I very much enjoyed the songs, and like you said, it adds to the lightheartedness of the film, which I enjoyed.
Cool. What did you think about the trip to the Possum Fest?
It was very reminiscent of the old Country Bear Jamboree from Disney. Disneyland, I should say. Of course, it's Disney.
I felt the same way.
Yeah, I think they they made it look all old and rickety to kind of drive home the uneasiness the son Max was having being on this road trip, and here you stop at this roadside attraction. But beyond that, it was a cute scene, and it helped drive home how uncomfortable Max was on this trip and how he just wanted to be anywhere but there.
Okay. Well, let me ask you this, and this is for both of you. Did you, as children, go on extended car trip vacations with your family?
Me, I've only been on maybe a half dozen or so. My dad was not a fan of long distance driving, which is really weird because I am. I drive long distances lots of times. In fact, we just came back from a San Francisco trip. But when we did go on long trips, my dad wasn't like, okay, kids, we're going to have fun on this trip. And, he listened to news radio, and other than that, everyone just kind of kept quiet. He was not a fun man. Yeah, that's the statement. He was not a fun man. I mean, don't get me wrong. Just a disclaimer. I love my dad. He was a great provider. He taught me a lot of great lessons.
So this is turning into more of a therapeutic session.
No, I don't need therapy. I knew it. He was not a fun man.
So back to the phone.
So your dad was not goofy.
No, he was not goofy. He was not even Pete in this movie.
Thank you. I was just about to say, but he wasn't Pete.
He wasn't Pete either. Like I said, my dad said, "Get in the car, sit down, be quiet. We'll get there." He
was just not lighthearted. Okay.
No, he was not. There wasn't even the joke always. Are we there yet? Are we there yet? Are we there? We couldn't even get one out without him saying, "Ask me that again," and we're turning this car around.
Very well then.
We'll just sit back and keep quiet.
Nice.
Yeah.
So back to the lightheartedness. I will infuse the light.
Way to be Debbie Downer, Dan.
Geez, that's why I had to get him this film for his shelf. Anyway, so my family was the opposite. We loved to take trips. Every summer we'd take maybe like 3 trips together, including a few camping trips or whatnot. So when I watched this film, especially as an adult, looking back at my childhood, I completely can relate to stopping and, like, for example, once when we were on the way to Vegas, we stopped, I don't know if anyone else is familiar with, like, a ghost town, I forget what the name is, on the way there, and that actually takes me back.
Baker's full of poor people, but it's not a ghost town.
Oh. No, we love Bakersfield. No, it's okay. Shh. It's okay.
No, Bakersfield's okay. I was talking Baker.
Oh, okay. Well, we don't like that. No, kidding.
You can cut that out.
Okay.
To all of our listeners in Baker.
All one of you.
Dan's only kidding.
So, anyway,
You knew the job was dangerous when you took it.
All right, back to Nina's childhood trip to a ghost town.
So when I think back to trips, like you're saying, and those few pit stops that you make in less popular areas, I can relate to them stopping at that, what was the name of it? Sorry, it was
the Possumville.
Is that what it was? Possumville?
It was Possumville, right?
It was a possum jamboree. Now you're going to ask me to remember something that I don't. Yes. The possum place.
Yeah.
I totally lost my train of thought. But yes, I can relate. However, in my experience, I find them kind of fun, because they're quirky. There's also normally a lot of quirky people in those, less populated areas. So, yeah, I thought it was a fun scene.
I enjoyed it. And one of the reasons I ask is when I was a kid, and we're going to move past my therapeutic needs and just tell the stories as they happened.
Go to hell, Ryan.
Occasionally, my stepdad would get my brother and I and my mom into the car, and we would just drive somewhere. It was like the Magical Mystery Tour, and we didn't know where we were going.
That's amazing.
And it could be a couple of hours, or it could be a couple of days, during the summertime or whatnot. So we went to, I remember several trips like that where I went and saw some interesting things that I cannot for the life of me remember now. But I remember we went to a place called Thunderbird Park, if I recall correctly. And it was a walk-through park with static displays of dinosaurs. And for some reason, I thought that was the greatest thing ever.
And so it transports
But I never
you.
went back. And I can never remember where the heck it was because I was young at the time. But that's what I was saying about this movie is it sort of brings you back to at least the happy parts of those trips.
Right. No, I agree.
And when I was a little older, I think in my teens, we would go from Oregon, where I grew up, to North Dakota, where my family was from, and we would make a long distance drive in the summer, and we'd go visit, relatives for a couple of weeks. And we did that, I think, 2 or 3 years in a row. And we actually did it in a motorhome a couple of times. Wow. So we could just play cards and do all kinds of stuff like that. So I've been on plenty of those road trips. Mm-hmm. But I don't recall everybody breaking out in song. So
no.
That's the thing. We have road trips now. Like I said, we've been up north to San Francisco a number of times. I don't think any of them we've ever broken out in a song, but they've always been fun on different levels.
We've always tried to have fun on our road trips. Like the I'm Goofy. I know, in this day and age of technology, a lot of minivans and stuff have the little flip-down DVD players and all that kind of stuff. When we drove from Memphis, Tennessee down to Orlando to go to Disney World, we had just one of the little flip DVD players that you could put on a platform between the two headrests. And we would just change that out for the girls. But while I was driving down the road, I could hear it in my ear sometimes when they would just take their headphones out before we got the splitters, so they could both have a set of headphones in. And I have listened to a metric butt ton of Disney movies in my ear while I'm driving down the road. So it kind of makes me sad that my kids missed some of the experiences of seeing things while we were driving down the road. But by the same token, if a song came on, we would all sing the song.
Right.
So we did occasionally bust out into the musical world.
Memories.
As it was queued up by the movie. Yeah. Now and that's again what I like about this movie is it kind of brings you back to some of the happier parts of your childhood. If you had those experiences, Dan, I have a number for a great, someone you can talk to.
I've got plenty of numbers for therapists. I've been to about half of them.
So, actually, can we delve more, a little deeper into what you're talking about, though? I completely agree because, like you're saying, some people have those experiences. Like you said, as a parent, you remember, taking your kids on these trips and things like that. And then as a kid, you remember stopping at some quirky places. And so I agree, as a child, I remember stopping, like I said, at that ghost town Calico on the way to Vegas. And I remember thinking, why are my parents bringing me here? This seems so odd. But now Dan can experience kind of the same thing, but as a parent. Because on our way back from our last trip, we stopped at the world's largest artichoke. Right? And so, for me, I was like, that's quirky and cool, and I can't wait until Tesla, loves this. But, again, now I see where my parents are coming from. Let's stop at this ghost town in the middle of nowhere. And as a child, I'm like, why? I feel like Max in the film. Why are we stopping at this less populated, very strange town? And now, from a perspective of a parent, I'm like, Tesla, let's go look at the world's largest artichoke. This is going to be amazing. And I can only imagine she's going to be a little bit like Max, why are we stopping at this large
Yeah, why are we at the stupid artichoke?
But I'm hoping, that she grows up, because there's a scene in there that I liked where Max kind of gets it, though. And he stops at the yarn house, the house made of yarn.
Yes.
And it totally makes Goofy ecstatic. And then the thing is okay, I've stopped at all the cool places, and Dad doesn't seem very happy about it. I'll stop here and look at him go now. It's I'm hoping that Tessa grows up to that.
Yeah, that part really spoke to me because that was that transition point. You know, it's the peaceful part of the movie where you see that they're starting to bond as intended by taking this car trip, and yeah, they go to all the roller coasters and the baseball games and stuff like that, and they're doing all the stuff that Max wants to do, and he does give his dad that quirky thing, like, I know you'll like this, or we'll try this.
Yes.
So yeah, no, that definitely speaks to bonding, and to kind of go along with what Nina was saying, I think, and this is just me, that sometimes we want our kids to see these strange, quirky things because it is kind of a once-in-a-lifetime experience.
Right.
You know, how often do you go out of your way to go look for the world's largest artichoke?
Right.
I didn't
we've
even know that
done
was
it
a
three
thing.
times already, so it just happens to be near where my
Okay,
cousins
well,
live. So.
all right.
But no, I get
Or
what you're
the
saying.
same, no, but it's like all of these things, though, that I'm sure, I mean, Gilroy has
The garlic
an
festival.
amazing amount of garlic, different varieties of garlic food, right? And so I just feel like most people would be like, really, that's so random. But as for some reason, as a parent, you're just so excited to take your kids, check out this garlic flavored ice cream, check out this huge ball of yarn. Like, it's just, I feel like it's just part of parenting, and I'm glad that they included it in the film. It's just fun. I like it.
Well, sometimes, and to the other piece of parenting is sometimes it's nice to see the awe and wonder in their eyes.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're doing it right, it carries over, so you feel that awe and wonder too. Because let's say Dan takes you to a place, you're like, okay, we'll go see this, but I'm not really that excited about it. You know, and Tesla sees something, he's like, oh, that's cool. You get excited because she's excited,
Absolutely.
and that makes Dan excited. So the whole thing works together, and I think that's part of why, going back to 50s television and that sort of thing, you know, when they would talk about the nuclear family, they would do those sort of things so that they could take a break from normal reality and bond over some different things that you all saw together. And
Right. No, I
yeah,
agree.
Disney captures that very well in this movie in particular, and in a lot of their other movies.
Even from the different aspects that the two of you are talking about, seeing it, her saying she saw it as a child, and then seeing it as an adult and as an adult parent. I had a little different take on this movie because I didn't see it until I was well into adulthood. I mean, like I said, it came out in 1995. I was young adult or younger adult, but I didn't see it until what? When did
We
2013?
watched it, right, only maybe 3 years ago he saw it
Yeah,
for the first time.
I saw it for the first time, and it was on her urging because, you know, for me, I mean, I'm not saying that he was a bad character or anything like that, but I never saw Goofy as a standalone character in the Disney lexicon. He was always the sidekick, or he did the little shorts, sports Goofy. Nothing had any deep plot or anything, So I never watched the Goofy TV series, so seeing him as a parent, I was like, wow, that's a little random, or I didn't really think much of it, And so when she said we gotta watch this movie, I'm like, all right, as the then boyfriend, okay, I'll do it because you do watch my movies, I will watch yours, it's all in fairness, and yeah, it was a good movie, but I saw it with different eyes because
This was before children,
this was before
also
children, and also
in adulthood.
in adulthood, but an adulthood that was molded by a childhood that was less than idyllic. Because I mean, even as an adult, I totally related to Max because I could not relate to my parents at all. My parents they weren't not. It wasn't because they were from a different era. They were just an entirely different personality. It's like I got all these friends who say that they're the people who they are because of their parents. I'm the person I am in spite of them.
And not to mix the words around, but isn't it really, you say in spite of, it wasn't like they were trying to turn you into somebody bad. You're a good person. Your parents wanted you to be a good person. They just had a different way of presenting it.
They had a very different way of presenting that. Yeah, they wanted me a good person, but in the image and exact way that they wanted, and it wasn't necessarily what I wanted.
So in relation to the film.
In relation to film, like I said, it's just I'm able to relate to Max, and in the sense that I understand, I totally get, Goofy or any parent like him, they're not bad parents. But it's just, I don't know, maybe it's just kind of a movie cliche where it's just like where they're either totally naive or they just purposely don't put themselves in their kid's shoes. You know, it's like, yeah, it's the whole thing. It's like, God, Dad, you're embarrassing me. And yeah, from our perspective, it's like, oh, come on, you're making a mountain out of a molehill. But to them, that's huge. You know, yeah, that's, you know, it's like the first time, your first crush and everything. You're doing everything in your power to impress this girl and everything, and it's the world to you. And yeah, you can tell them later. It's like, look, there's a lot of other fish in the sea. There'll be many others, and that there's a lot of more important things in life, and da da da. But at the time, in the moment, you know, it's like, take a minute and say, yeah, okay, I get it. This is huge. And that's why I guess, like, the first time I saw this, it was a little frustrating. It's like, come on, Goofy, you know, it's like,
Well, he's goofy.
get your kid there.
He's
Show
goofy.
some empathy.
Well, I just want to give credit to the film, though. So in the scene after, you know, they go through this whole fight and it finally comes out, their true feelings come out, right? So I remember very well, Max says, I'm not a little kid anymore. Those are his, I think, like a direct quote, right? And Goofy, his reaction is, I understand. And when, you know, like the way he says it, he says, I understand, but I just want to be part of it. He's like, I know you're growing up. I know you're moving on with your life. And I feel like those two things that they include in the movie are perfect. That's to me, in my experience, that's the relationship. It's the child saying, I'm not a kid anymore. I'm not your little boy anymore. And there's the parent saying, I completely understand, but I still want to be part of it. So I think that's a perfect scene.
That was a great line that says, you know, I've grown up, I've got my own life, and it's like, I understand that, I just want to be part of it, and that was perfect. I agree with her on that. That just never happened to me.
I will tell you that watching this movie when my kids were younger, I looked at it differently. I did look at it as sort of a preparatory exercise because I expected at some point in their lives that I would feel the same way. And I don't want to scare you with, you know, a 2-year-old and everything, but my oldest is 17. She just finished up her junior year of high school and she'll be a senior next year. And I cannot tell you how much I feel like Goofy at this moment because they're going off to do their own things and I just want to be a part of it.
Exactly. As a father, you want them to do that, right? But like you said, you want to have a place in that.
Yeah, I you know, I don't want to know every single detail, but you know, I'd like to be asked, you know, for my advice. You know, I'd like to have a conversation. Now, I will say, and this is, you know, I've had some fantastic conversations with my daughters about different things, and I really love that. So that's one of the things that as they grow up, you know, that I'm gonna miss when they're not in the house, and I can't just walk over and say, hey, you know, thank God for, you know, telephones and cool stuff like that. But it's amazing how on the nose this movie is when Goofy says, you know, what you're talking about, when he says, I know you're growing up, Max. I just want to be a part of it. That hit me when on this rewatch, and I was watching it with my, like I said, with my 17-year-old, and I kind of looked at her, and I didn't really say anything, but it was kind of I hope you're catching this, you know. I hope you understand.
Yeah.
Like, just because you're gonna go off to college or do whatever doesn't mean that, you know, I'm not still here. And even when she's out driving, or if we went up to Washington D.C. It's about a 3.5-hour drive, and she drove for about 2 hours of it, and I was a little nervous because, you know, it's kind of like that Subaru commercial where you look over and your 6-year-old is just sitting there with her hands up in the air grabbing the wheel, and she can't see over it, you know, and you always look at your kids as
Oh my God.
your baby and not the adult humans that they're becoming.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Well, it's a great thought too, because that's like our little baby's thing right now. She likes to sit in the driver's seat and hold the steering wheel, and I'm sure we're gonna have that moment where we're gonna remember that image where she's, you know, doing back and forth with the wheel, and I was going beep beep hi, it's
Yep.
like, yeah, and then all of a sudden later on there's going to be that 16-year-old getting behind the wheel, and we're going to see that image. And again, I'm totally agreeing with on the scene that the pivotal scene is like, I just want to be part of it. For me, though, the scene that really got to me, and this is the scene that, when you're saying, oh, I hope the kid's gotten this and everything, and I'm hoping as fellow parents, I hope they're getting this scene too, is when they're at the Neptune Hotel, and Goofy says, I'm going to go in the hot tub, and later on Pete joins them, and through the movie Pete's telling him that you've got to rule these kids with an iron fist. And he's asking Goofy, how's the progress and everything. And Goofy says, well, I tried it your way, and it just, seemed to make him mad or whatever. I forget his exact line. So in hearing the line where he says, yeah, when I just eased up, things were better, it just reminded me the lesson from Star Wars. The more you tighten your grip, the more that, and to paraphrase, the more your kids will slip through your fingers. I just hope that's a lesson that the parent side heed from this movie, is that
The parents viewing this movie.
Yeah, from when parents look at this, they say it's like, yeah, this is a great bonding movie, but bonding does not mean tightening the grip.
But it also doesn't mean being just their friend. And I think that's another thing that's the takeaway from this movie, is Goofy was trying to be his friend, but he was also trying to be his dad. And there's a distinction there, and I know a lot of parents just try to be their kids' friends, and they forget that they're their parents.
Right.
Yeah, very true, and that's the thing, is like finding that balance of being a parent, but also being a bit of a friend. It takes a little bit of a mixture of that. And unfortunately, you got a lot of parents who are like Pete, and that was the disturbing line in that same scene. And it's like where Goofy says something, I forget the exact line, but it's like, my son likes me and everything. Where Pete responds like, my son respects me, and that's the thing, is like, are you talking respect or fear?
And that's what I'd like to kind of discuss more in that. When I was watching this film, to me that was a very important point that the film makes. There's a difference between the parenting styles, and they make it very clear. There's a love versus respect. So I kind of wanted to see, like, Brian, what do you feel about that? They very clearly made Goofy the loving, quote-unquote, loving parent, and the other parent said no. Like Dan said, the quote was, he respects me. So you make a choice. The movie, I feel like, asks you to make a choice. Do you want to be the loving parent, or do you want to be the parent who's respected? What do you think about that?
I think, and just to start, I think that Pete was trying to be feared, and I think that I think one of the lines he actually said, my kid fears me. I'm trying to remember if it was specifically respect or not. I think that
Well, the hot tub scene, he does say respect. My son respects me.
Does he say respect?
Yeah. And that was the thing, like I said, I found disturbing, because when Goofy says, my son loves me, love and respect kind of go hand in hand, because can you love somebody you don't respect? So when he says, my son respects me.
Yeah, and that was where I was going, because I think that, and again, I agree 100% that they were definitely trying to show the opposites in parenting. The respect that Max grew to have for Goofy is the ideal of how a family should work, at least in my mind. I have always tried to be like Goofy. I know that sounds weird, but I've always tried to be like Goofy as a parent. I want to have fun with you. I want to be a part of your life. But Goofy also had the parent factor. He was concerned, and I get the feeling, I don't know, that Goofy would, but I get the feeling that Goofy would be perfectly willing to discipline Max if he needed to. I mean, he was willing to take him on a 2-week road trip, to try and, reestablish a connection that he'd lost because his son was getting older. So I think that Pete's example was an excellent example in the extreme of what happens when you just want to control every aspect of your kid's life. And you could see, and I can't remember Pete's kid's name now?
PJ Pete.
Yeah, Pete Jr., I assume. Yeah, so PJ, you could see, and I know I don't want to get into a deep psychological analysis, but you could kind of see, and I think they portrayed it well, PJ was he was that stereotypical kid that's like, my dad is controlling, I'm going to have the fun that I can have when I can have it. He was always hiding it, whereas I think Max would be more willing to share with his dad if he wasn't concerned about being his dad, about turning into his father. And that's something that I would kind of like to talk about when we get past this, because I want to hear your thoughts on the question that you asked me. I think that Goofy is a much better father, and as soon as he realized that he needed to respect Max as a person and the person that he was growing into. And I don't think that you were ever going to get that from Pete until, life basically hit him upside the head with a shovel that PJ was growing up.
Right. Agree.
So the question that I wanted to ask it goes back to the very beginning of the movie, where Max wakes up from his nightmare of turning out like his father. And I think that is a great storyline, and subplot really, is I don't want to be like my dad because my dad's goofy. And not goofy, but strange goofy.
Goofy as a negative is.
Yes, and not Goofy the character.
Yeah.
I think that a lot of kids at that age, because Max is, 14, 15, I guess, from the movie. I don't think they really ever give his age.
No, roughly quasi-high school age.
Yeah.
Is what they kind of
but
portray.
That is that really understandably awkward transition age where you're coming out of being a kid. I mean, and again, it goes to the whole movie. You're coming out of being a kid, but you aren't yet an adult, and you've got those 3 or 4 years before you're forced out into the world, and you have to figure out who you are, and you're scared of becoming your parents. The good thing is, in the end of the movie, he realizes that maybe that's not such a bad thing, and I like that.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't want to sound like too lame in that, but I feel like in this way I can't relate, only because, like you're saying, his nightmare is to end up like his father. I can't relate at all because I always thought that would be amazing if I turned out to be half the person that my parents were. So, yeah, I think it's just it's just an individual kind of thing.
It is definitely on the individual family, and I think that this is purely anecdotal. I have no peer-reviewed science to back this up. I think that your experience might be in the minority. If we use the three of us here as an example of society, I'm going to go with the 66% of the group is probably more concerned about not turning out like their parents and evaluating that as that's a thing I don't want to do, than the 33%.
I can agree.
Yeah. I mean, you make it.
I really didn't expect this conversation to get so deep into psychology.
And right there kind of brings us to an interesting point about Disney movies in general. Again, you brought it up that, it's a Disney movie. Everyone thinks, oh, what a wonderful kids' movies. But that they're also made for adults, which we all kind of know, just under the surface. Yeah, there's a lot of subtle adult humor. There's some themes that they slip in that kids may not notice, but adults totally get.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. No, I would like to add that that's something I wanted to discuss was the substantial themes in this movie. The one being differences in parenting style, love versus respect, the junctions in life that you face. Does Max want to go left or right? I mean, the changing the map. This is something that I would have to lie about. And when he rips up the paper, there's a piece of paper stuck in the tree that says lied. I mean, completely. Yes, this movie is on the surface lighthearted and giddy. I mean, it's called a Goofy movie, but within this movie are substantial themes that are, amazing.
That are always present in Disney movies, but Disney again has a talent among their other talents of presenting them without being preachy or shoving them down your throat or
well, they make it digestible too.
Yeah,
sure.
Well, that's
that's
an excellent way to say it. Yeah, they're very digestible, and again, who'd have thought? I guarantee you that the people who are going to listen to this podcast, when they see a Goofy movie, I'm sure a lot of them are going to gloss over it because they're just not interested in the Goofy movie. But you're going to get the few who listen to this and they're like, wow, I didn't realize that there was so much to this movie. You hear that kind of response for a lot of movies that you and I enjoy mutually. I mean, when we talk about Star Trek, and I do mean Star Trek, when everyone thinks that, yeah, silly sci-fi, campy, but when you really discuss with them and show them the deep undertones and the themes that they explore, and they're like, wow, I never really realized anything. And they're going to be, I think when they listen to this podcast and realize that there was more to this movie than just being a Goofy movie, they're going to be hopefully pleasantly surprised and start really looking into it a little more deeply.
Yeah, but being a Goofy movie, it does make it a little more fun, and again, goes to that digestibility. And in the immortal words of Mary Poppins, a spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down.
I was just thinking that. If you didn't say it, I was going to say it.
I'm Mary Poppins, y'all. But getting back to some of the other themes, one of the other things that I had noticed as an underlying theme was communication. And if you're not talking, then you can't know what the other person is thinking. And again, Dan and I have talked about this in some of our previous podcasts, that sort of rule of threes. There's they're not talking to each other when they're playing with the radio and the tape. And then there's the Bigfoot scene where they're not talking to each other, and then they sort of transition into talking to each other. And then the third scene where they're on top of the car going down the river, where they actually are fully talking to each other. So you see that growth throughout that, but they actually start communicating, and that's when you start to see them actually solving a problem.
And it's going to sound like I'm promoting this song, but again, at the end of the movie, when they're at the concert that they've been trying to get through for the entire film, the last song that plays is Listen to Each Other. And again, it wraps up everything you just said. Communication was the key, and at the end of the film, that's what they say. If we listen to each other, that's how we'll get through it.
Can you sing some of that?
Perfect.
No, the thing I felt I had to interject, though, is I think that third scene that you're talking about, when they finally do start communicating, I think it's a little longer than what you were saying about them getting into the river, though, because I think that scene started when they're reaching the interchange, and Goofy is telling, which way do you want to go, right or left, right? And, you see the conflict in Max and everything, and he says, fine, left! And then after he makes that decision, they're going, it's like, oh, that was close. And all Goofy is doing is making that face, where that very uncharacteristic, and I think that's when they, and it's the irony is when there's nothing being said that they actually start to communicate, because now Max is starting to see that, his dad is very visually upset. It's not quite, he doesn't quite communicate disappointment, but he's definitely upset. Max is starting to realize that. And when Goofy, in his uncharacteristic moment of mild anger, pulls the car over, and just wants to look at the view or whatever, and again, not very much is being said, but they're communicating, and finally when they're put in that situation where the car rolls down the hill and into the river, and now they start talking to each other rather than at each other, and that's where it culminates. But I think that was that whole thing, and like I said, I saw the irony of that, where it's like now nothing's being said, but things are being very clearly communicated.
Yeah, well, they say a majority of our communication is nonverbal.
Yeah, and that's the funny thing too. It's like it was almost that cliche where it's like, I'm not mad at you, son, just very disappointed. And that really hurts you more than if he said he was angry.
I think that carries a lot of weight, though, and that kind of goes back to what you were saying earlier, why some people may be slightly turned off to this movie is because it's not the sport Goofy that you know and love. It's not Goofy on the beach yet, Waikiki. It's a more realized being instead of just Goofy being flung about in the air and howling.
He actually has 3 dimensions in this movie, which again is not common for him in the Disney lexicon.
Exactly. So I think that may have been why this was not as
Well received, and
as it wasn't Beauty and the Beast. It wasn't Aladdin, which I think came out around that time. The Lion King actually came out around that time. So I think this was sort of shoved in there as a pure Disney movie instead of Disney animated movie, if you catch the distinction. Like I said, when this movie came out, I was 24, 25, and I still went and saw it as an adult human. But again, I like Goofy, so what can I say? I will say there were a few minor quibbles that I had with the movie.
Oh no.
What, I can't have quibbles?
Is that where we're going? No, I would just like to say, talking about this movie has just made me like appreciate it even more. So now, all right, we'll go down this lane.
we hit a dip, Martha.
Damn it. One is very minor, and it's always bothered me about some of the cartoons of the age that's trying to emulate, is packing 6 million pounds of crap on top of the car. That's just always kind of bothered me, but that's very, very minor. The other thing that I was a little, I think from a development standpoint, because it came into play so prominently later, is either Max is a freaking genius, or he was practicing the perfect cast off to the side. Because when Goofy is teaching him the perfect cast, he is not paying attention. It's clear on his face. He's like, why are we here? I don't want to see this. And Goofy is 10, 4, 11:30. Goes through the whole thing. And Max is like, all right, 10, 2, got it. Okay, whatever, who cares? And then later on, when he's got to save Goofy, he does the whole thing perfectly and saves Goofy. I would have liked to have seen maybe a little more of Max, thinking about the perfect cast as opposed to just executing the perfect cast brilliantly the first time he ever tried it. Unless it's in the Goofy gene. I mean,
Brian,
maybe they've... Yes.
I'm going to explain that it's genetics. He was born with it, and we'll leave it at that.
I was just about to go there. Like, maybe they mapped the Goofy genome and said, oh, perfect cast, look at that.
Or I can just go film school on you. He was present during the lesson, and that's all you need to do is to establish that when he finally actually did do it, it was plausible. Suspend disbelief for the rest of it.
I pushed the button. I didn't care. I was having a good time. And you did get to see the perfect cast later again during the Powerline concert, so... there's that.
There you go.
There you go.
And just a strange piece of trivia. I know this is sort of off the track. It just popped into my head. But because we were talking about the Powerline concert, and that flashed back to the beginning of the movie where he broke into the assembly and was doing a Powerline thing. Pauly Shore, who did the voice of the AV nerd, who liked Squeezy Cheese, is uncredited in this movie.
Oh, really?
Oh, well, he's credited in IMDb, but
When I was watching the credits for the movie, I was like, "Where's Pauly Shore? I know that's Pauly Shore's voice." So then I watched.
95.
Yeah, and then I watched. I went to IMDb and looked at the credits and said Pauly Shore uncredited. I was like, "Oh, really?" So then I went back, and when I watched the movie the second time, I made sure to look for Pauly Shore in the credits, and sure enough, he is uncredited in this movie.
Why? I wonder why that is, though, because I'm looking at the timeline. This movie came out, I think, in 1995.
95.
And he had just done Son-in-Law in 1993, which is also another favorite, in case you guys want to add that to your shelf collection. So that's interesting.
Do you own that?
I do not.
So y'all don't own that?
I might own it. The side note, we have separate shelves. Don't delve too much into that psychologically, but I might have that. Anyway, I'm just
Lie
curious
back.
why
Tell me
he.
about your mother.
I know. But I am curious as to why he's uncredited in this film, because it's not like he was unknown. That's just my point in bringing up the date.
That was during his heyday, because I mean, I think he had from 93 to 98, where he was, he made like 4 or 5 movies and then sort of faded away.
Oh, this is true.
Yeah. The thing that puzzles me is a lot of times when Disney uses a certain talent, but they will kind of keep it on the back low or whatever. It's just wondering if an actor's reputation or anything. But I don't remember Pauly Shore ever really having that bad of a reputation.
No, I mean, that's what Brian, actually, you did bring up a good point. I didn't realize that is kind of at his peak, because he had Encino Man in 92, Son-in-Law in 93, and then this movie in 95, so...
I think sometimes it's also at the actor's request. They're just, hey, I just want to lend my voice talents to this, and you don't have to credit me. And it might be some contractual things and stuff that I don't understand.
It might have been Disney's reputation, because maybe Pauly Shore wanted to be edgy. I was like, I don't want to be Disney.
Perhaps. I don't know. He did make the Leaning Tower of Cheesa, which I use all the time. So, that's how I knew Pauly Shore was in it. I mean, otherwise it's like, all right. I couldn't tell you who, except for going to IMDb, I couldn't tell you who did the voice of Goofy, who did the voice of Max, who did the voice of Pete.
Actually, it's a cast of relative, and forgive me for using this term, but relative unknowns that did most of the voice work. I'm sure they're pretty well known in their genre. I mean, in voice actors, there's a little community. But the one voice I did recognize was that of Wallace Shawn, was one of the school officials during the assembly. He wasn't the principal. He was He was like one of the teachers.
No, he was the principal. He was Principal Mazer.
Was he the principal?
Mm-hmm.
Huh. I'll double check that. But I heard his voice, and I'm like, oh, inconceivable. It's like.
Yeah, I completely forgot that he was in this until I heard it. I'm like, oh, there you go.
But just kind of touch on that though. It's like Disney has a habit of putting big time actors in their voice work and I don't say not crediting them, but really not highlighting them. And I first learned that with Finding Nemo, when I realized that a lot of those actors, or rather a lot of those fish, were big time actors. Eric Bana was one of the sharks. Jeffrey Rush was the pelican. What's her face from West Wing was the starfish. I'm like, wait, why did that mention all these people?
Yeah, that's a selling point.
But no, they figure the movie's going to sell without their name, So that's Disney for you.
Now, Nina, are you a big Disney fan? I know you like this movie.
I would
but...
say I'm like the average Disney fan. I mean, how can you not really appreciate the talent of Disney? So I'd say I'm like your average fan.
Okay. My wife is what I might call a super fan. If you walk into my house, it really is sort of like trying to find the hidden Mickeys, as you would when you go to the Magic Kingdom.
Nice.
So we have about 30 sets of Mickey Mouse ears on display.
Oh, that's a definite super fan, yeah.
Yeah.
I think you're a little bit beyond super fan at that point. I think you're in a whole other category.
Yeah, Mickey's in every room in the house, so...
Surprised she hasn't painted Mickey ears on your Darth Vader back there.
Yeah, no, not so much. we would have words. But, so, was there anything else that either one of you wanted to talk about specifically about a Goofy movie?
For me, just kind of, and this I noticed because it was the establishing shot in the first opening seconds of the movie that you really kind of notice everything. Maybe it's the DVD copy that I have, or maybe you'll see it regardless. But just kind of the low resolution animation that it just really harkens back to old style 2D animation that Disney used to do. That's where they really cut their teeth on, and it's just seeing that just those first few seconds, like, this is an old Disney movie. I appreciated that. And
what's interesting about that is because it was made in in the mid-90s, and I think I mentioned this earlier, when Aladdin came out and Beauty and the Beast and The Lion King, and Disney was really getting to that big
CGI
getting away
push.
from to adding this some CGI in there as opposed to the straight cell drawings of the past.
Yeah.
I think this was one of the let's keep the cell animators busy doing stuff kind of things as they sort of winded their way down. I'm not sure which verb tense to use on that. As they wound their way down from cell animation into more of the computer animated, and not just CGI, but the actual animation was done with computers. I could be wrong about that. That is completely a guess on my part, but you're absolutely right. I appreciated the 2D animation, and I wish that they would make a return to some of those, because they do have that feeling of nostalgia for especially people our age of the cartoons and animation that we watched as children.
Yeah, I was going to say I really don't know a lot about like the different types of animation, but the thing that I enjoyed was just like the simple when the map is coming out of the car in the scene when Max is deciding whether to change the route or not. Just the simple extreme red that's coming out of the light that's on, or when he's making a decision a few times, like the colors change to like a drastic blue or drastic red, and I just from the simple artistic movie standpoint, I just enjoyed that. So that's my
it really does set the mood too.
I was going to say, there's a interesting YouTube video that talks about movie making and using color specifically to set a mood and anything. And I don't know if we had like websites, I'd provide a link, but I can't remember the name of it. But maybe later on the...
You're horrible at this.
Yeah, I know. Well, we're amateurs, so...
It's okay.
Start sending me a paycheck, I'll get better.
Okay. I can send $1 your way.
And it'll be $1 worth better.
Yes. One of the things that we normally, Dan, you bring this up, but I'm going to do it this time, is the extras on the DVD.
Go for it.
Did you watch any of those?
The edition we have, it does have a few. So, seeing that I'm just discovering that, no, I haven't watched them. Did you?
I might have watched.
So, the one I have has the Calling All Goofs cartoon, a Goofy success story cartoon, and a storybook, and the Goofy movie trivia game, and the theatrical trailer. I watched both of the cartoons that were on here, and I'm not going to lie, I got about halfway through a Goofy success story, and I kind of turned it off. I'm like, alright, not that exciting. The Calling All Goofs, which is a Goofy family reunion, and it I think it was an extended episode of the Goofy TV show cartoon that Disney did, because Max was much younger, maybe about 8 or 9, and it was okay. I didn't really get much out of it. I'd rather just sit and watch a Goofy movie over and over and over again than force myself, which I did. I forced myself to watch them so that I could say I did. They're
When we bought this, we really weren't motivated to find any kind of special or ultimate edition. It's the gold edition they call it, but just a standard DVD with a few. I think in this sense, I think the special features. But yeah, we were just the movie itself was primarily enough to have this on our shelf.
Yeah, that's the only reason I bought it.
So actually, I wanted to ask you a question, Brian. Have you seen the sequel to a Goofy movie, which is...
An extremely Goofy movie?
Yes.
That's on my list of movies that I own. Yes,
oh,
I did.
Really? So I haven't actually... I think I've seen maybe a few scenes from the sequel. What did you think of that compared to the first? Just quickly, like your thoughts.
It didn't put me under the same magic spell as the first one, but it was serviceable. It was fun.
Nice. Okay. We'll have to catch up on that one then.
We'll get to it.
Yeah.
Well, if that comes up randomly, then we'll include you in the mix, and you can come back again.
Oh, thanks. That was my goal, sticking that sequel in there.
So, just kind of like, while staying on the subject of the Goofy movie, but changing the subject of the conversation, I just dawned on me that the character's name, obviously his name is Goofy. We've always known him as Goofy. But the son is credited as Max Goof. So does that mean Goofy's full name is Goofy Goof?
No, actually, thank you. I was going to try and work this in somehow. This is the only time, if I recall correctly, in Disney animated movie history that they use Goofy's first name, and his name is George.
Oh.
I guess his name is George Goof.
Really?
Wow.
Was it? What's the? I really missed that. Where was that?
It is in the hot tub scene that we spoke of earlier.
Yes.
When Pete climbs into the hot tub, he calls him George.
I remember that now that you've said that.
I missed that.
Yep. Even though on IMDb he's still credited as Goofy because, well, that's his name.
Yeah, he's Goofy.
He's Goofy.
George Goof.
It is one of those little bits of trivia that I happened to run across while I was doing some research for this particular podcast. I hadn't really caught it, and I just kind of paid attention. It's in there. They call him George, or Pete calls him George.
All right, well, there's our little treasure there.
Yep, there you go.
There's your hidden Mickey. Huh? No pun intended.
Yes, well played.
Thank you.
You know, and just to bring up a little point of humor, which I found kind of just unusually stand outish as far as the humor, is when Pete gets in that hot tub and he's like, "Man, they always put too much water in these things." I just
Yeah. That was funny. I did like the RV. I liked Pete's RV.
yeah,
It was an entire home on wheels.
with a bowling alley on the roof.
Yes, and it came with a strike maker to boot. So all you had to do was yell horribly at your child. I gotta say, I know I opened with this, but I just can't tell you how excited I was to watch this movie for the rewatch. Just how much it brought back. This is just a simple, happy story. Contained in, like we talked about earlier, in an hour and 18 minutes. It really was, in my opinion, one of the better examples of what a good animated movie can do.
I agree. No, I feel like there was a major journey in that short time, from the beginning nightmare opening scene to every place they stop on their road trip, and then finally the end when they finally make it to that concert. So I think it was like I said, I just feel like you go on a major journey in that short time.
Yeah, I think that that one of the things that has always attracted me to Goofy as a character is that he is so lovably well-intentioned, and when they pull the car out of the driveway to leave on the trip, he runs over his fence and he says, "Goodbye, house. Goodbye, cat. Goodbye, chunks of wood in the road." He's so joyfully oblivious of the things that happened around him, and yet they always end up for the best. Now, I do have to wonder how much money Goofy actually makes, because repairing the damage to the fence, the car, and then Roxanne's porch roof. Yeah, I'm pretty sure he's got to be making a lot of money as the photographer.
Yeah, I'm sure that mall photographer job pays pretty well.
And I did always wonder what Goofy did for a living, so that was nice that this movie answered that question as well. Which actually brings me to my next question. So Tesla is 2, and I think it's difficult to gauge what a child would understand of this movie at the age of 2. But are you going to show this to her later on in her life as an object lesson or as a fun family movie? Like, hey, let's get together and watch a movie. Oh, and we're watching this.
I can't wait until we get to share this movie with her, only because, like I said, I had seen this movie when I was a child. I don't remember the exact age, but I just think that growing up with this movie and being able to have the different perspectives of I'm watching this as a child, I'm watching this as a teenager, and I'm watching this as an adult with a child is kind of an experience, and I'm excited that she'll hopefully enjoy that.
You'll probably get, now, if you do it when she's younger, you'll get, okay, cool, we'll watch this. But later on, you'll get an, oh, Mom.
But we watch it yearly, so suck it up and deal with it. But, in that loving tone.
Well, sometimes you gotta make them fear you.
That's how you get them to respect you, according to Pete.
Yeah, exactly. So once again, the lessons of the Goofy movie.
Who knew?
I don't know, and that was kind of one of the overarching questions is how much did the creators actually think about what they were putting into it? I mean, I know when we watch movies, a lot of times we get out of it what we want to see, but how much of that was intentional and how much are we just reading into and saying this mirrors my own experiences, or this is something that I can understand as a thing that happens, but it's not the way that I grew up, or it hasn't been my experience.
I would have to say that it's completely intentional. I say that just based on the numbers here, because if Disney hit it out of the park one time out of their entire repertoire, it would be a fluke. If they did maybe 3 or 4 that were really good, then I would say, yeah, they got some talent or whatever, but they're hit and miss and everything. They have such a large percentage of movies, especially now with Pixar, but just about every movie they put out has a much deeper emotional content than most other movies you will see out there. I'd have to say that is intentional. They know what they're doing. They know who to use, what talent to tap to make it happen, and it happens. So I would say that's entirely intentional, because it's just too often to be coincidence.
True, they actually seem to be interested in telling a decent story, as opposed to just making some crap that people might go see.
Yeah, they know where their talents are, and they are very adept at using them.
Absolutely. So, do you guys have any final thoughts on the movie itself, or are you good with where we are?
I just wanted to add that now that I've had this discussion and been able to participate in this podcast, I think I have an even greater appreciation, because now I've been able to go back and think about, like, as you said, the memories that the movie brings up, and then looking back on the first times that I have viewed the movie versus now. And I just think that it's a cool experience, and I think that hopefully you have a listener who hasn't seen this movie and is listening to this and pauses it halfway through, hopefully without any spoilers, and picks it up and views it. So I think, like I said, I enjoyed the movie, and this was a fun discussion, so thank you.
Not a problem. I absolutely enjoyed it. I love this movie. I'd forgotten how much I loved it until I saw it again. So I want to say, Nina, I truly enjoyed this conversation. It was a whole lot of fun, and it was amazing to get somebody else's perspective. And I think that it's nice to talk about a Disney movie in a way that is more than just, oh, the animation was great and it was fun. I mean, you actually got into the conversation, and I really, really appreciate that. It was an absolute blast.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was nice to have somebody with a sunnier disposition.
Dan, your disposition is sunny, just not all the time.
Yes, and the next movie is Black Cauldron.
Yeah, oh no. The normal question that we ask. Dan, did you have any final thoughts? I'm sorry.
Nope, I'm pretty much I've said my my piece on it and everything, and I'm glad to have it in the collection. I'm glad Nina brought it up when she did, because otherwise I probably would have just glossed over this movie.
Nice. Good. See, Nina, helping the podcast.
Yes, my contribution.
So the next question that we normally ask is, where does this movie belong on your shelf? Is it a top shelf movie in the way that one might keep a fine wine on the top shelf? Does it belong in sort of general population?
Well, we have it in general population. Like I said, I've mentioned before in other podcasts, I have a special section for Disney, but they're the Disney Blu-rays. Unfortunately, this movie hasn't come out on Blu-ray yet, so it resides in general population, alphabetically under G.
And not just for me, it's not physically where the DVD is located, but for me, I wouldn't call this like my top shelf movie, but I would say that it has a special place because, like I have discussed before, this is one of the movies in the collection of I want to share this and hope that my child at least enjoys it, if not appreciates it. So, yeah, that's my piece.
Oh, fantastic. I'm gonna lean more towards what Nina said. This is not on my top shelf, but it is definitely in that special place in my heart. And in the grand scheme of movie making, I'm gonna put it somewhere at the top end of general population, just from an overall movie standpoint. But if you add the modifier of special place in my heart, that puts it much higher. So. This is a fantastic movie.
Well, thank you again. This was fun.
Yeah, no problem. I hope we can do it again sometime. Not necessarily with a Disney movie or a Goofy movie, but I hope we run across another movie that tickles your fancy. So we don't have any listener comments or feedback from any of the podcasts that people have downloaded, so we really don't have anything to work with there. And this is now where we click the random magic movie button.
And this is going to be the next movie you're going to discuss? Uh-oh.
Yes. Yeah, this is how we pick that. Which makes Dan mad because I call it the random magic movie button. He wanted to change the name, so.
So is it really just a randomized, like it takes all the movies from the list and just selects one?
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
Yeah, I got bored and wrote a program to do that, so I sat down and typed in every single flippin' movie that I own, and Dan has sent me a list of movies that you all have, and I just go through and change the put a little X when we reviewed it, and then I hit the random magic movie button.
Dan's pick.
Oh, well there we go. It's your pick. You get to pick the movie, Dan.
Wait, what?
What?
So here's what I did.
Apparently
Okay,
you
so
guys don't remember.
remember we discussed this. I typed in my 400 movies, and then Dan sent about 30 or 40. You sent me a list of 30 or 40, and I included those on the list. But to balance it out so it wasn't just my movies and, maybe 10% of Dan's movies, I added about 150 lines of Dan's pick so that they would possibly throw up in the random movie thing. So that gives Dan the buy-in on selecting a movie.
Well, he wasn't joking when he said the next one's going to be dark, so prepare.
Yeah, so what's the next movie, Dan?
Damn.
Too long boo.
Too long.
Oh, that would be interesting.
Well,
I haven't seen that in a while.
Okay, well let's make things interesting then. I will put out 3 titles, and then of those 3, Nina will pick.
Okay.
How's that sound?
There we go. I'm okay with that.
So,
in case you hadn't figured that out.
Are we doing that right now?
Yeah, we're doing that right now.
Oh,
So I'll
You're on the
say
spot.
3 titles.
Okay, I'm ready.
3 titles. Okay, title 1, Captain's Courageous. Title 2, the original 1954 Gojira, aka Godzilla. And to throw something maybe a little bit newer, To Wong Fu. since she said it.
Well, I have to choose Tu Wong Fu. You should definitely do that one. I feel like, yeah, I think that would be cool.
Okay,
Tu Wong Fu, thanks for everything.
Thanks
Love,
for everything, Julie Newmar.
Yes, I think that'll be fun. I'll listen to that one for sure.
That'll be a hoot. I might actually go out and buy that. That's an off the wall movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. No,
off your wall, not mine. See what I did there?
Yeah, I see that. Yeah. All right, so Tu Wong Fu it is.
Okay. Well, to our listeners, first and foremost, I want to say thank you for downloading us. At last count, we were at 67 downloads. So somebody's listening to us, and we want to thank you for that. I want to remind you that we appreciate you leaving feedback on our Facebook page. We also have the opportunity to leave feedback on the Podbean page, which we link to in the Facebook page. That's our primary vehicle. But if you could leave us a 5-star review on iTunes, that would be great. We would love that. And we're also available on Google Play, and I am still currently exploring how to tie our podcast server feed to YouTube so that we can provide it that way as well. I still haven't figured that one out. It's kind of a weird connection that I haven't made yet. But if you have any suggestions, feedback, comments, we certainly would appreciate you getting in touch with us. And you can also contact us via email at wrios2016mr@gmail.com. And Nina, would you like to send us on our way?
Sure, I look forward to Tu Wong Fu.
Awesome. Thanks.